Hello everyone. Welcome to a webinar on mobile learning in the workplace, derived from Towards Maturity in Focus report. Good morning, afternoon, from whichever part of the world you join us from. Thank you for being with us today. My name is Sanjay and I'm a marketing executive at Upside Learning. I'm going to be doing a quick introduction before we get on with the webinar. There's a couple of housekeeping things I have to go over. You will be receiving the recording of the webinar via an email. We have some polls lined up for you during the course of the webinar, so please do participate. And lastly, feel free to ask any questions from our experts using the chat facility. Alright, so just a bit about the company now, Upside Learning. For 10 years, we have been helping organizations of different sizes and types to improve performance through better learning. With our head office in India, we serve clients in the UK, USA, Australia, Middle East, North Africa, and other countries. A wide range of innovative learning solutions include Upside LMS, a multi-award winning learning management system, Upside to Go, a mobile performance support platform, and custom learning solutions for desktops, tablets, and smartphones. We have been recognized and awarded by Brandon Hall, Training Industry, Deloitte, CLO, Apex, Red Herring, and have won the award for the e-learning team of the year for 2013 by e-learning age awards. And recently we've also won the 2014 Apex award for publication excellence. Alright then, so let's get straight into it. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the speakers. Amit Garg, Director of Custom Learning Solutions, and Alan Samuel, Director of Client Solutions of Europe. Alan, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Sanjay, and good afternoon, good morning, welcome everyone. Great you could join us. So I think we've all been waiting to start, so let me quickly take you through the agenda. This is what we're going to be covering today. Quick overview about the report and some of the detail of background of it. Amit is going to take you through the state of the industry in terms of what the data has shown us. I'm then going to come back and give you a heads up on how you can get started looking at what other people are doing, what the data suggests, and then hand you back to Amit for the final session, which will be implementing the new learning agenda. So let's jump into the first part, which is all about the report. As you may have seen already, this is a report done by the organization Towards Maturity. It's called Mobile Learning in the Workplace, and it's derived from their annual benchmark survey that they do. Our association with this is now over 2 years, and one of the reasons we have been associated and are very keen on this is the fact that we believe certainly that mobile learning is something that is going to be a major game changer in, I think, the not too distant future. We're already seeing signs of it. We've been doing a lot of research ourselves on this, and I think this data bears out a lot of what we have been saying and anticipating over the last couple of years. We also believe that this kind of data actually helps organizations take an informed approach about their mobile strategy. It gives them the confidence, it gives them direction, and provides evidence that their initiatives, their strategy is going in the right direction based on, tangible evidence of what other people are doing. Plus, of course, that we live in, the new multi-device world. Most of us are using multiple devices through the day. We all own multiple devices. So I think all of this and the data you will see through the course of this webinar certainly highlights parts of this. Like I said, we did this last year as well, and we've also sponsored a mobile learning report by ASTD in the past. So that's the kind of background of our association. Towards Maturity, for those of you who may not know, is an independent organization that presents researches and presents it, collects and shares good practice. They've been publishing an annual benchmark report since 2003. The 2014 one is just, they've just extended the deadline, so if you haven't participated and you'd like to, it's always a good thing. So this is the 11th one they've done. It's recognized and considered one of the most comprehensive and independent reviews of how organizations are establishing tech-enabled learning technology, things like that. This year or last year, in this study, they had over 548 organizations stroke individuals across 44 countries. And I think about 60-odd%, 65% was from the UK, and the balance 37-odd was from the Middle East, as far away as Australia. And I think we have some of our friends from down under on this webinar as well, so welcome. And that's the report, which is available on Towards Maturity site. If you'd like to download it, it's free. So let's quickly run you through what the Towards Maturity model is. It's really a model which is based on 6 work streams, as you can see on the screen. And it talks about moving from defining the need, which is basically alignment with the business, both from a strategic as well as from a learning perspective. It talks about learner context and giving learners choice, providing motivation for learning. The work context is providing, therefore, the infrastructure, the IT platforms, and managerial and leadership support. This then moves towards building capability and ensuring engagement, which is about building skills, learning, doing through assessment, measuring outcomes. And the last aspect, which is demonstrating value, which is again collecting, analyzing feedback, measuring the effectiveness, and communicating impact and benefit. So this really is the model. Arising out of this, in 2010, the Towards Maturity developed the Towards Maturity Index, which is a scale of 1 to 100, on which organizations measure themselves. And this gives them a measure, and the benchmark breaks it up into quartiles. And we'll be talking about the top quartile through the rest of this presentation. So let's just give you a background of what the basis for this is. As I said, if you look at the quartiles, what the data has thrown up consistently over the years is that for those who are mobile enabled and who have adopted mobile, and in the top quartile, they are 4 times more likely to see benefits through productivity. You'll see even in revenue, engagement, application of learning. So it's certainly a very powerful data set which we can all use as an excellent guide. Let's quickly just look at what these, and they track them over 12 parameters, and I'll quickly show you what these are. They've clubbed them as 2, the business impact, so where our ability to change procedure, process, and products is improved, the measurement of customer satisfaction, rollout of new applications of IT, it's certainly a lot faster than it used to be. Learning interventions have increased organizational productivity, and we're seeing more direct correlation and tangible results of this at this stage. And if we look at some of the other indicators, which are staff satisfaction, staff engagement, and I think certainly in the learning technology area, engagement, staff engagement uptake has always been a challenge. One of the holy grails in everything we do is reduction in time to competence. So how can we get people hitting the ground running from very quickly after moving into a new role or joining an organization. Qualifications and certifications certainly have come in to learning in a much bigger way than they ever have been. And certainly going forward with TINC and everything else, I think this is going to only become more and more important. Staff turnover is again a direct one of the parameters which certainly can be influenced quite strongly through learning technologies. So these and of course lastly the efficiency indicators, which are the key drivers: costs, volume and reach, access of training, and reduction in delivery time. Sometimes I think these should have been the first three we talk about, because this is very often where we start our analysis in most cases. So that's kind of a background into the report and some of the models, etc., and where the data comes from. So let's go straight into the next item on the agenda, which is the state of the industry. Over to you, Amit.
Thanks, Alan, and welcome once again, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. I hope you can see my screen and are able to hear me all right. If you're not, just raise your hand and we'll know that. So we'll begin with the state of the industry as to what the data is really showing us, where we are in terms of mobile adoption and what various things are people doing. Before that, if you could do a quick poll on if you are using any mobile or tablet in learning in your organization. It'll be great if you could respond to that quickly. Wow, that's coming fast. All right, we'll give it a few more seconds. We have about 82% people voted, so that's good. We can, and here we are. We have about 41% people saying yes, they have started using mobiles and tablets for learning in the organization, and 59% saying no. Interesting. I think that's a good enough indicator, though we don't obviously have the same kind of sample size that the research had, but it's a very good indicator of where things are. About 40% people or 40% organizations actually doing some mLearning. Alan, what's your experience on that? Have you been seeing more percentage of organizations picking up mLearning now?
Yes, I certainly, well, they're certainly buying the devices, let me put it that way. And I think, again, from the data that we've been talking about, you'll see there's a large body of experimenters and experimentation happening. So I think certainly there is movement. Certainly it's on everyone's radar, and I think it'll only grow.
Perfect. So let's look at what the research was saying. In fact, the research started off with the statement saying 2013 was the year when mobile learning became the norm rather than the exception. And in fact, the research found that about 71% organizations which participated in the survey actually were using mobile learning. Now, before we go ahead, just a word of caution with that data, because further down when you drill that data a little deeper, it actually says about 46% are using and 25% are experimenting. So about that makes up the 71% that's been shown there. But I don't know if the respondents on this session for the last poll did not include the experimenting part. And at the same time, it could also be that the kind of people who would get interested in this session might be more from organizations who are not doing mobile learning. So it's not too far away from what the research says. But just coming back to this number, 71%, it actually is a big jump, and we'll see it on other slides as we move along. But it's a big number, and that gives us a lot of confidence in what we have been believing all this while. For about 2-3 years, we have been saying that mobile learning is going to grow and become one of the key things in in the whole learning mix that an organization will be offering to its staff. Here, the data has been divided into quartiles, the quartiles that Alan just talked about, the 4 quartiles which are selected based on the 12 parameters that Alan shared, which are performance indicators, and based on that they get scores from 1 to 100. So all the companies which are in top quartile, here we can see, which is Q1, there is about 83% adoption of mobile as compared to 57% in the bottom quartile. So that's obviously a significant difference. If you were to look at the same data based on their own perception, that is the participants' own perception of how mature they are in terms of using learning technologies, because they may have been doing e-learning for some time, etc. So all the other data points look quite expected. It's the one which is the first one, which is novices, people who are not at all matured in using learning technologies, are certainly showing a lot of adoption of mobile. Now that's very interesting, and there's another slide on this, another data point. If you look at the same data from the perspective of number of years they have been using e-learning, again, people who are just starting off with e-learning are moving on to mobile learning very quickly. It's almost like leapfrogging the e-learning stage, for the last 1 or 2 years. Anybody who's just beginning with e-learning, they are tending to leapfrog and get into mobile learning directly. And there could be several reasons for that. Organizations never had the need for e-learning because they didn't have so many people. They only wanted communication between their staff and senior management to improve, etc. They are moving on to mobile learning because mobile gives those kind of benefits, while they never had the budgets to do e-learning. So mobile learning is not just developing courses and putting it onto devices. It could be more than that: communication, interaction, asking for help just in time of requirement, seeking resources just when you need them, etc. So mobile learning might just fit in better. Another reason which could be leading to this set of data would be the non-availability of or the lower levels of desktop penetration in certain companies and definitely regions. The developing countries, for instance, a large population there is actually laying their hands on the first computer, on their first computer, in the form of a smartphone. So they've never known computers, and they are going onto smartphones as their first computer, and they're now connecting onto the net, etc. So those could be some of the reasons why we are seeing novices and people who have not been doing e-learning for long suddenly jumping up on the mobile learning adoption charts. The same data, if it is presented by location, again, slightly surprising that single site companies are the biggest adopters of mobile. You would tend to think that multinationals and companies in different locations might be doing that more, but surprisingly it's the single site one. And if you look at it from country perspective or regions geographically in the world, Canada, USA leads the adoption of mobiles, while UK is comparatively lagging, with other European countries and Australasia coming in between. Here is another set of data which is about comparing the projected numbers versus actual numbers. So what has been projected in past, so what is being projected this year for next year, and comparing that with what you actually get in that particular year. So the green ones are the actual usage and the white ones are projected numbers. As you can see, between 2012 and 13, there is this sudden jump in the actual usage, even though the predicted numbers have not really changed much, maybe about 5-7%. The actual numbers have grown by almost about 20%. So that is where I think 2013 has been phenomenal for mobile learning adoption. It would be interesting to see if the 2014 actual numbers actually beat the predicted numbers and come out more than 72-73%. We are expecting it might. Okay, Before we get into the next section, here's another quick question for you. And we want to understand how and which devices. And so let me just explain that. Which devices means are the devices yours or company provided, and how means do you have a BYOD policy, or are you using them without a BYOD policy? So the four options are personal devices under a BYOD policy, clearly spelled out by our organization, personal devices in absence of a BYOD policy, or provided devices by the company, or not using it all. While you're responding to this, there was a quick question whether the slides will be available for download. Yes, they will be. We'll send you the recording of this session after the session is over by mail. Okay, about 71% have voted and it's been closed. So we have about 43% using provided devices and 30% using personal devices in absence of a BYOD policy, which is quite interesting. You know, that's always been the case, that companies have really lagged defining a policy and employees have really started using devices. There's a question about BYOD. BYOD is actually bring your own device. So a lot of organizations are now getting into that structure where they allow employees to bring in their own device, and they can then access corporate applications and learning modules or even business applications on their personal devices. So email is typically the starting point. Most salespeople, senior management would be accessing emails on their own personal devices even before the company formulated any policy. So that's very interesting. 17% people are using it under a BYOD policy, 30% in absence, and 43% are being provided devices. So one way or the other, we are ending up using some sort of devices. Alan, any comments?
Yeah, I think I'll focus on the 9 who aren't using it. But I think certainly what this says is that it's more than well established and being used. Interestingly, we've seen this more and more, which is the 30% using their own personal devices to work off, and I think that's an indication of the ease and access and the mobility and everything else we've been talking about mobile for a while. I think this is now more and more a reality. So yeah, very interesting.
Brilliant, thanks. All right, so we'll quickly hide these results and move ahead. Okay, so if you were to look at what the research suggests in terms of how the industry is playing it out, there are about 52% organizations which are providing smartphones. There are about 48% organizations, the second set of columns, who are providing tablets, and 41% actually have a BYOD policy. And if you see the blue ones, these are actually the top learning companies, that is the top quartile. And the difference between how many of the top quartile companies are providing these devices. So there is obviously a higher number of companies, higher proportion of companies in top quartile who are providing these devices. But the most significant is, of course, in the BYOD space, where clearly almost 1/3 more of all organizations are really providing, having a clearly stated policy. Further breaking up that same number, the first column here is the 71% that we started off with, which is broken into 46 and 25. That is companies which are using mobile. And that number goes up to 78% in 2 years' time. The second column is again the same thing that we saw on the previous slide, 52% providing smartphones, but again broken up into how many are actually providing and how many are experimenting. And that goes up to 59 in 2 years' time. Tablets are 48. If you see, there is a very high proportion of experimenting in tablets, because tablets is is about a year and a half, 2 years behind the smartphones from their date of initial launch, and that could be the iPad and versus the iPhone, if you can take that as a benchmark. So they are now getting into that stage where a lot of experimentation is happening, and we actually believe that tablets are the ones which are leading this charge. And if you can see, even from 48% to 59%, they show the biggest increase that people are projecting. So we are also quite confident that tablets are the ones that are leading the charge in the mobile learning space, and we'll talk a little more about that in some of the slides that are following. Okay, here's a slide from a report called Learner Voice, and that's again published by Towards Maturity. It's a parallel survey that they have for the learners, and what they do with that is they try to understand what the learners are actually doing. How are they actually learning? Not asking them about their expectations, etc. Not asking them what will happen in 2 years, but on the ground what is happening. So this is just one slide which is included in the mobile learning report itself. But there's a full report that is available. The link is provided at the bottom here. You can download the whole Learner Voice and see it. It's quite interesting. So we've just picked out this for highlighting one or two points here. The number one is 43% agree that accessing learning from their mobile is essential or very useful. And of course there were other options in the question which would be useful, not so useful, and useless, let's say, something like those. So, but then there are 43% who are actually with the top two options, that is maybe rating it as 4 or 5. So that if you have the third one also, which is useful, it would actually go up much higher. The second data point is I want to draw your focus on is in the chart below that, which is 41% people are using their own mobile phone, 32% are using work mobile phones, 24% are using their own tablet devices, and 7% work tablet devices. So kind of mapping with how many companies are giving what kind of devices and how many people are hence using their own personal devices. But a fair amount of personal device usage that's being shown here. Okay, we have, I think, 4 polls. This is the third one, so bear with us. We just hope to get a sense of what's happening out there and how does it match with the report itself. So here's the third poll, which is what benefits do you wish to derive from mLearning? And of course you can choose more than one in this. So you want to improve access to support at the point of need, improve employee engagement, improve communication between individuals. Learners can use their own mobile devices, improve communication between learners and tutors. Another 5 seconds. Excellent. So we have 71% improving employee engagement, 69% wanting to improve access to support, 44%, 51% improve communication between the learners and tutors, 44% wanting to improve communication between individuals, 42% learners can use their own mobile devices. Excellent. I'll quickly go on to the next slide where we have the data from the survey. And incidentally, all of these options are the top drivers for mobile learning in 2013. And there are a few more, but just to match these numbers with what we just got, 80% want to improve access at the point of need, 79% want to improve employee engagement, 77 wanted to improve communication between individuals, 76% wanted to improve or let learners do the learning on their own devices, 74% wanted to improve communication between learners and tutors, and a couple of more increase appeal to millennial learners, that's very interesting, and reduce the cost of IT support. Of course, with BYOD, you would have some sort of cost benefit coming in, but then you need to have proper systems in place. So that's what the survey is also saying, and I think we're pretty close to what the survey says here. Interesting that providing access at the point of need is so important, and then I think mobile does play a very big role there. Okay, so that's the end of this section, and I will hand over to Alan to take up for the next part, which is how to get started and what are some pointers for that.
Okay, thanks, Alan. And yes, we now get to see how we can do this. There's obviously a lot of data out there that says and talks about benefits. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as well, and try and show you how the numbers stack up to that as well. But before, and I promise this is the last one, I had to squeeze one in for myself. So, are you using mobiles and or tablets for learning in your organization?
I'm sorry, Alan, this is the one that we just did. I think you are one section behind, so you need to just quickly jump to that section.
Whoops, sorry. There we go. Benefits of technology.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, okay, so let's jump into this quickly. I think, again, these are numbers that have come from organizations that have adopted and are using mobile technology. So productivity, hugely important, 73% reported an increase in revenue. Time to competence, we talked about that earlier, and again, significant benefits reported there. And 75% behavioral change, so positive behavior, things like that, which is a huge benefit given the fact that learning technology has traditionally struggled a bit with evidence of behavioral change. So these again are hugely important, and these are actually up from figures in 2013 as well. But I think significant is mobile usage actually increased the proportion of staff on L&D engagement, so which is not in the numbers, but it was one of the outcomes that came based on this. And again, mobile gets you into the top quartile. They receive twice the value of the benefits that we're reporting here. Right, I think this is my poll, and it is the last one. So, which device are you likely to start mLearning with? And this will be interesting to see. So if we can start that, please. I think it's fascinating to watch how the vote swings, but it's, I think, pretty clear where it's headed, unless smartphones make the last-minute recovery. I think we give it a couple of more seconds, and yep, if we can publish the results, please. Okay. So, sorry, I'm looking at this, and we've got a 58-42. It looked like it was 60-40 earlier, but I think so. Significantly, tablets is where this is headed, and I think all evidence points to that as well at the moment. So, if we can move on to the next part of this. Yeah, so let's look at, if as we all believe that tablets are the place to start, let's look at what's the best way of doing this. What we're saying is, through technology, the nature of the workplace has changed. There's a lot more use of technology. There's a lot more mobility in the workforce, more flexibility in timings, plus the expectation of immediate access to information when we need it. All the devices we own and are available, we're looking at the tablet really as the in-between device, or the bridge between phones and the desktop. And these have also contributed to the change in the way we interact with computers. It's a lot of it is now information at that point of need when we want it, and the volume of information has come down. Again, we saw from the numbers earlier, we're quite happy, organizations are obviously quite happy to have BYOD policies allowing us to use our own devices on our own. Whether the policies exist, we're also quite happy to use our own devices to do our work off. And tablets really are amongst the fastest growing category against all mobile devices. And tablets are, from the 10-inch became 7, phones have gone from 3.5, 4 to 5, 5.5. So I think somewhere in between is why we believe this is the bridge. And what we have also seen is a lot of organizations are looking at their legacy content as the first port of call to actually get learning onto mobile devices. We call it M-enablement because it's more often than not existing content which organizations are now looking to deploy or make available off mobile devices as well. So that's a great place to look to get your mobile learning up and running. Again, all of this and more is available on our blog, so have a look at that. We talked about BYOD, or bring your own device, earlier. In this benchmark, this group comprised about 115 organizations. Interestingly, about 137 of them provided tablets and 150 smartphones. That doesn't necessarily indicate that smartphones were provided for learning. A lot of those are BlackBerry, email, etc. But if you look at 52% in this instance, 41% support BYOD. But what's interesting is some of the overlaps between providing smartphone and tablets. There's a 15% overlap. There's an overall overlap of about 18%. So BYOD certainly is gaining ground. Typically it's seen in larger organizations, multinationals, and also with those organizations who've been in learning technologies, the top quartile kind of company, for over 10 years. Let's look at quickly the business benefits that we drive out of this. Obviously, we're seeing that e-learning contribute to organizational productivity, and this is the 43% is from the BYOD group, and the 31% is from all users. And again, you will see that those with a BYOD policy certainly have a higher achievement or higher benefit that they've achieved through this. Critically, there's managerial support, leadership support linked to business. There's a direct link that we're seeing, and data is showing that is being reported that there's a revenue increase as well. Sorry, I was just having a quick sip of water. Moving on to staff benefits and the people benefits. We're seeing the application of learning increasing quite rapidly, quite dramatically, from the more traditional learn and then apply. This is the mobile allows you to access information and apply it straight away. The whole collaborative, and I'm I won't talk about social as much as the collaboration part has gained momentum as well, where we're tending to recommend to our colleagues and peers that why don't you use mobile, it's so much easier, faster, etc. So there's huge gain there. Staff behavior and behavioral change again shows its face, which is heartening really. So I think the benefits of BYOD certainly are there from that. Moving on to the next thing, it's where we're talking really about, this is about matching device and delivery. 35% of the organizations are actually enabling content for mobile use. Of the top e-learning companies, which we talk, or top learning companies, the top quartile, that number jumps to 53%. So there is a very conscious movement towards making content available and accessible via mobile, tablets, phones, etc. This is just a quick example. This is one of the our clients who had a huge bank of legacy content, very often built in Flash, and we all know the problems of Flash not being supported on the iPads, but they came to us and we've successfully enabled a large chunk of their content to run off iPads, and which is now available. It's increased reach, etc., etc. Okay. So what does content look like? And we talked about 35% earlier. And how many organizations are actually doing this. And if you look at the numbers here, again, the green is people who are currently doing it, and the white bars are the percentage of people who are planning to do it over the next 2 years. And if we can just look at that for a second, what is very significant is the fact that mobile certainly seems to be on everybody's radars in one way or the other. And the plans are in place. We talked about the experimentation population earlier, and what we're probably seeing today is a lot of the current usage is partly experimentation. So we looked just now at 35% actually enabling this, and if you look at the numbers below, it says 27 and 8. There's 27 using it, 8 experimenting. The other significant shift we've seen is moving to HTML, which again is significant from a future-proofing perspective, and therefore we're looking at how this is going to be deployed on mobile. And again, 21% are looking at apps, but are not yet integrating them with their LMSs, so we're more performance support, information-based, etc. We're seeing 1 in 3 smartphone providers are using tools to develop apps, but again, this is significantly lower when it comes to integration into a learning management system. Ofcom recently reported that 48% of smartphone users actually download apps, but 2/3 of the apps downloaded were not regularly used, and I think probably we're all guilty of that as well. Along with apps, of course, it can change the way we build our learning, the way we design our learning. We're able to use things like GPS, where you can deliver learning based on location. We're getting used to that already with our Google Maps, etc. We can report or we can record evidence, information via camera and mail it back into the system. So I think the form of the apps and the way we're using them. And again, a lot of organizations are now looking at distributing distributing these apps through their own private app stores. IBM has their own enterprise app store which they maintain, which allows them to control access, even down to role-based access. Here's an example, again, of an app that we built a little while ago. It's for Toyota. It was internal and to look at the product features of a new car. Equally, this could be external for customers to be able to explore and get a feel for the new version of the car. So this is a content app. It is learning, yes, but it's not necessarily need to be tracked and recorded, and therefore doesn't necessarily need to be, linked back to the LMS. Security, which is one of the biggest concerns. 60% of the respondents of the benchmark were concerned about IT security, but funnily enough, only 32% of that actually have policies in place. 6 out of 10 organizations express concern about loss of data, perceived increase of viruses, etc. To that, and these were seen as barriers to the adoption of mobile learning. So it's obvious that this is a big area of concern, but a lot of people aren't really doing too much about it. MDM and MAM talks about mobile device management and mobile application management solutions. And this allows, again, like I said earlier, to control access, to manage all the mobile content that you have. So to leave you almost, I think we're almost to the end of this section. So what are the 6 things we would urge you to consider? The first one is it driven by a business need? And a lot of the mobile adoption we're seeing in organizations, for instance, a lot of the Salesforce departments have been given tablets to start with. And again, it's indicative of the need, the business need. The guys are out there, they need information, they need access, and with tablets it's a perfect match. Again, it's a lot of the drivers for this is pull, the users and learners asking for it. You see the BYOD, or the use of personal devices, a clear indication of this. We've seen from the learner voice that Amit talked about, certainly an extreme willingness to use their own devices for work related. I think almost 41%, if I remember correctly. The big question is, while all your learners might be willing, do you have enough content out there which they can not only access on their mobile or tablet devices, but critically, what is the quality of the learning experience? Because that's obviously key to the use of this kind of content. And are there programs which are universal, which are well received, and which you could use as a pilot, basically to get people to open their heads up and think about using devices in a different way, or using mobile learning more aggressively? And lastly, come back to BYOD. It's obviously something that needs to be addressed right up front. What kind of content are people putting out there? And the data shows that almost 76% of the material that's being deployed onto mobile devices are in the form of job aids, and job aids could be PDFs, could be checklists, could be how-to videos. As again, the other aspect which we're seeing hugely again, and this is part of M enablement as well, is 53% are looking at online books. So they're not just the digital books, but they're doing the work in interactive PDFs, M-books. So actually making Word and PDFs, etc., interactive and more engaging. Organizations, again, who've adopted mobile learning are, certainly amongst will make available more content, both externally but will invest in things like podcasts, blogs, links to external video sites, TED Talks, YouTube, things like that, if they believe it is contributory, and people will learn from that because people are going there anyway. So that's really the kind of content that we're seeing out there. With regard to the aspects for adoption of mobile learning, and again, this is about what are the devices, what are the use of mobile learning per se. When we've seen mobile apps, we're seeing QR codes, and we're seeing people, organizations adopting management tools to manage this entire area. Again, significantly is obviously the top learning companies, but significantly also is the plans that exist to achieve or to move towards this in 2 years' time. So again, evidence that mobile is still very much on the agenda. That brings me to the end of my section, and for the last one, I'm going to hand you back to Amit. Amit, if there's any comments on the getting started section before you kick off, over to you.
Yeah, just want to reiterate that tablets are really the starting point. It was interesting to see that in our own survey we found that more people wanted to get started with tablets. I would encourage you to look at that blog post that was mentioned once you receive this slide deck. The link is there, or you can just search for why tablets are a great starting point on our blog, and there is a video that we have created explaining the reasons why tablets are really standing out. But then we know that a lot of you are already thinking about tablets as the starting point. Okay, so let's quickly get into the last section. We have about 10 minutes with us, so we want to leave at least a few minutes in the end for any questions that come up. Okay, so implementing the new learning agenda. What is the new learning agenda? Actually, what Towards Maturity has come out with in 2013, which is the main benchmark report, is the new learning agenda. What they have done is their annual report, they come out with what are the action points. So last year they had, I think, bridging the gaps. They had identified the key gaps between, I think, the top quartile and the bottom quartile, and what was desired and not being achieved, etc. So how to bridge those gaps. This learning agenda, which had 9 specific themes that they had identified, that if these are the ones that these are the ones that need to be worked on from L&D side to really get it more aligned with what is required and how to deliver the best results. And I think they're also seeing some of these already happening in the top quartile. So let's look at the 9 the themes that they have identified within the new learning agenda. And we'll not go in deep in these, but we'll just explore 2 of these, which are also covered in the mobile learning in focus report that this webinar is based on. So we'll look at 2 of them after this slide. Align learning to business and business to learning, respond faster and scale faster, transform traditional learning, support a culture of learning, integrate learning with talent, embrace new ways of learning to support new ways of working, simplifying the learning experience, develop L&D professionals as change agents, and treat learners as customers. I like the last one, treat learners as customers. That's actually brilliant. If that could be the motto with which we can all work, I think all e-learning, mLearning will find the right purpose and the right kind of output will come out. Anyway, but we will be focusing on the number 3 and 4, which is transform traditional training and support a culture of learning within the workflow. So transforming traditional learning, this is what the survey really finds, that 60% of learners, so this is coming from the learner voice, 60% of learners value courses as something that is important for them to achieve the skills that they need to do their jobs. So what they're saying is the traditional training is really not dead, and even e-learning, the courses that you do in e-learning are really not really that useless, which sometimes you may be made to believe. At the same time, they also find that 88% of all respondents actually want to do learning at their own pace. Now, there is some indication about how to transform the traditional learning. Maybe think about resources rather than courses. So you can't really have 2-hour courses or long curriculums always. Yes, useful for beginners in a certain stream and for inductions, etc. But for general training and moving people up on the performance scale, I think it's shorter nuggets, resources which are searchable, maybe even available on mobile devices, so people can just do it when and where they want, rather than being constrained to do it in a particular place or a particular device at a particular time, etc. The second thing that it throws up is 56% of L&D staff believe that courses are just one of the many options that they have in implementing learning in an organization, effecting that change. But that also means that 44% actually believe that courses are the only option. But that is where I think change has to come in, which is we need to think beyond courses. We just talked about resources, making them available on mobile devices, but there is still more. You can really create a very healthy blend. You can have pre-courses, you can have post-courses, you can have assessments, you can have summaries, you can have scenarios, you can have the whole program spaced out, you can have discussion forums after the programs, and you can have opportunities to let learning come back to work after the formal training program has been delivered, which we'll see in the third data point that has emerged, which is less than 1/4 of organizations are supporting application of learning. So they don't have any mechanism to really let learners apply that learning once they have been through a formal training program. Though that number really increases to 1/3 for top learning organizations, but even if you go by the top learning organizations standards, that 1/3 is really not huge. But I think it's also because of the type of devices and systems that were available. Maybe with mobile, this would become much easier. And we'll see it on one of the slides where I think it links more to performance support than to training. So it's kind of linking formal training and learning with performance support. So how do you have performance support built in or added to your training programs, which is where I think mobile might be very useful. So transforming traditional learning is the first one. The second one is supporting a culture of learning within the workflow, where we have, again, the green ones are users of mobile versus the white ones are non-users. So encouraging learners to organize their own personal learning strategies. Again, there's a big gap. Encouraging peer-to-peer feedback and encouraging learners to share experiences and solve problems online using social media tools. Once again, I think what all of these data points are suggesting is mobile is inherently more suitable to be able to do these things. So all these organizations which are able to do a little better on all these three parameters because they are using mobile is a good indication that mobile might be enabling some of these things in the organization. The same data set also gives us a comparison between top learning companies versus non-users of mobile. So in terms of offering staff access to job aids, top learning companies are way ahead. Integrating performance management with their learning and development, again, more than double. Managers recognizing the value of on-the-job learning, again, very, very high. And this could be actually crucial because in the learning voice that we talked of briefly, there's another data point that most of the staff are more influenced by the manager's recommendation to training program than the L&D's recommendation or influence. So if the managers don't understand what is the value of on-the-job training and what is required, etc., it would be really, really difficult for companies to implement those real-time help applications. Understanding support systems available to staff, again, the top learning companies are way ahead of the non-users of mobile. This is another one which is more on performance support. And we'll not pick all of these, but what's interesting is that the mobile users versus non-users, almost on all points, the mobile users are way ahead. let's look at the third one, which is we use available support systems to provide self-reliance, not a culture of dependency. Now, that is something that a lot of organizations would want to do. Let the learners learn on their own, become independent. They should take charge of their learning. But that is not possible without adopting new technology. And as we can see very clearly, there's a big difference between mobile adopters versus non-users. So we'll not go into this, and all of this is available in the report. I will end this with this couple of slides, and these are not really information, but there is within the report, there's a section on 10 tips on mobile learning implementation, which you might find very handy. And there are a few case studies that we have included in the report from our side. The first one is on Vocalect, which is on M enablement. Alan showed a screenshot of that. Algesser, which is about learning English through mobile apps, and Zangro, which is a classic case of the novices or the non-mature organizations on e-learning scale, because when they were starting with e-learning, they straight away went to m-learning as well. So they started with e-learning and m-learning together, and they actually used a unified solution to manage their learning on desktops as well as mobile phones. As you can see, there's a screenshot of a QR code as well. So they really adopted a lot of new technology at one go. So that would make interesting reading for you. So that's all from our side. Happy to take any questions. I think we do have a couple of minutes. Thanks, Ravi. There's a question from Chakrabarti Ganeshan on planning to come out with mobile learning for schools. How can we facilitate that? We can help you set up infrastructure. We can help you do content. We can help you devise a plan, strategize, etc. Chakrabarti, do get in touch with us. John, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Ian, thank you very much. Good night. I know it would be late. Thanks, Alan. Yes, Hilton, the webinar recording as well as the presentation slides will be made available via email. Thanks, Martin. All right, with that, we'll end this. Thank you very much for participating. We really appreciate your time. Feel free to let us know if you have any queries after this. You will receive an email shortly from us, I think by tomorrow, with the recording. Thank you very much.
Thanks, and bye.
Good night.